This morning we'd like to talk to you a little bit about cattle handling and pen riding and using horses in a feedlot. And we've got with us this morning SethWilliams. He works at the Timmerman feedlot near Ashland, Nebraska. Tells me he's been here about 4 years at least as a pen rider, and kind of has been a pretty good horseman before that. So we're going to ask him some questions, and he'll show us a little bit this morning about riding pens. Seth, when you ride pens, what time of day do you like to ride pens?
Well, ideally, a guy likes to go into a pen on newer cattle when they're being fed. That way you can tell if the critter's eating, he's probably healthy. And if they're not, that's something you need to look at. But here at the feedlot, we start feeding at 7 and we start riding at 7. So it's kind of hit or miss on whether you're in the pen when the cattle are being fed. But so a lot of times it's during feeding is when we ride our pens.
Okay, so if they come up to feed, you're reasonably sure that things are okay. Is that correct?
For the most part, you still need to look at them and take a glance at them, but if they're hungry and they're eating, then most of the time they're healthy.
Okay, and if they don't come to the bunk, then what do you do?
Well, we ride down, and if they're laying down, we'll get them up. If they're standing up with their head down, we'll move them around and see how they react to you, and you can usually tell on the way they react to you whether or not they're healthy or not. And if for the most part, that's pretty successful doing it that way.
So what are you looking for when you're riding through those pens?
Well, we look for something that's standing off by itself. If he's down there by himself, then there's something wrong with him. The cattle that are running a temperature, they're not up there with the rest of the cattle, and if they're a little bit lame, a lot of times they'll lean back toward the back of the pen. Depending on the weather, if they're up to the bunk, I don't necessarily have to go move them away from the bunk. If they're clear back at the back of the pen, because that's the way the wind's driving them, I'll let them stand back there, and I'll ride through them and keep them quiet and try not to move the whole bunch at once.
Do sick ones tend to get by themselves, or will sick ones stay in a group?
Yes, sick ones, they'll usually stay by themselves. That's pretty sure thing. You need to look at everything. You need to look over all the cattle in the pen, but the sick ones are kind of a focus that you need to look at.
And you're looking for what? Ears, nose, eyes?
A little bit of everything. If they got a little snotty nose, that's something I look at. If their ears are down, of course, I'll ride over and move them around. If their head's down, usually they're either sleeping or they're sick. And if they're not sick, then they'll move out for you. But a lot of times if they're sick, they'll show it to you when you ride up to them, and just by the way they react to you.
Okay. Do wild cattle present more of a problem finding sick ones than quiet cattle?
Yeah, with a wilder pen, newer cattle, we come in, they're not used to a horse a lot of times. They'll make a big circle in the pen, but for the most part, we just try keeping the cattle as quiet as possible. So they're moving out away from you. You stand in the spot where you can see all the cattle. If they're all walking by you and they're all look like they're healthy, no heads are down, there's nothing lame, you just stay in one spot and let them work their way around you. So that's kind of how we handle them wilder cattle.
So sometimes you may sit there and watch the cattle move rather than actually driving cattle around.
Yeah, you can find
what's happening.
If you try driving the cattle, with the newer cattle, when they especially come in and they're not used to a horse, there's gonna be some flight and they're gonna try getting away from you.
What do you do with those newer cattle when they come in, and let's say they've never seen a horse? They're farmer-raised cattle, aren't accustomed to a horse. Do you do anything special?
Oh, we don't necessarily do anything special. I guess the biggest thing is going into the pen and being as quiet as possible. Like I say, them cattle will get to moving on you, and you try staying in one spot and try letting them cattle get used to you instead of forcing it. Let them get used to you on just by milling around you.
Okay. Would you pick any different kind of horse to go into a fresh pen of cattle? Would you take a quieter horse as opposed to a fidgety, nervous horse?
Yeah, I try not to take my younger horses into the pens just because of something happening. Them cattle get to running and they spook your horse and he gets to bucking, you're going to have a wreck. So you try going in with a quieter horse that's going to be able to handle them cattle on a run.
Okay. Seth, what do we need to know about maneuvering cattle as far as flight zone, and how do we turn cattle? How do we get them to go a different direction? How do we separate them from other cattle in the herd? What can you tell us about that?
Well, doing it all my life, you learn to to see how cattle react to you, and it's something you just automatically know. For a newer guy, I guess the way to tell him is at the shoulder, at the front shoulder, on the side that's next to you. If you're on this, if he's up here and you're over here, and you get in front of his shoulder, he's going to stop and he's going to turn away from you. If you get behind the shoulder, he's going to keep moving forward. And if you're trying to get something out of the pen, that's kind of the way you want it. You just want to stay in that position where he's moving forward. You're not getting so far back that he's trying to turn on you. You just keep him headed toward the gate. And so there's a soft spot in them cattle, and as long as you can find that, and in every critter it's a little bit different. You know, it can vary 4 or 5 inches, but as long as you know that soft spot and you stay in front of it or behind it, depending on which way you want to move the cattle.
So you're talking this soft spot somewhere kind of equal with that calf's shoulder on each side. So if you get ahead, he'll turn. You get behind, it'll tend to drive him forward.
Yep.
Okay. Any difference in your position as you maneuver cattle with quiet cattle versus wilder cattle?
Yeah, them wilder cattle, you know, they're going to be a little more flighty, and you're not going to have to be so far up to get him to move forward. You're going to be able to stay back a little bit and let him go, you know. And if he's going where you want him to go, you let him go. You don't need to force the issue. You don't need to speed it up or slow it down. If he's going where you need to go, then you let him go.
Okay. If you find one that you think needs to go to the sick pen or get treated, do you try to bring one out at a time? Do you try to bring several out at a time and sort the ones you don't want back? Or
well, right now here at the feedlot, we're riding pens with one guy, so it's easiest just to take the critter that you want to get treated. You don't try taking any more than that, because you get them out on the alleyway and get them out on the rocks, you know, you're going to injure your horse. You try sorting cattle in the alleyway. So we try taking the one critter that's sick, preferably. If you have to take 2 or 3 just to get them out, you know, because treating them is the ultimate thing, the ultimate goal. So
once you open the gate, what keeps all the cattle from going out?
Well, I try to kind of move the cattle away from the gate when I go in. If I'm gonna I'll shut the gate when I go in and ride the pen, and then if I find something sick, I'll go back up and open the gate, and I'll move the cattle away from the gate and start moving the critter towards the gate. Sometimes you have to leave the critter and go move cattle away from the gate again and go back and get around him. So it's kind of when you're riding pens by yourself, it's a little different process.
Okay. Do most feedlots ride pens by themselves, or do they have the luxury of multiple cowboys riding?
I think for the most part, a lot of them get to ride pens with a partner, and that's the ideal way to do it. That's the safest for the horses, safest for the cattle, and the cowboy too. So that's the way to do it. If you have, I mean, you've got to do what you got to do, and right now we're just doing it with one guy. So.